Raise your hand if you're here for a youth that's over 18, or 18 and over. Thank you, 18 and over. Okay, we've got a lot of hands there. Okay. Then we'll go 15 to 15 and 17. We've got quite a few. Okay, great. How about 13 to 15? We got one. Okay. Anybody younger than 13 have their youth here? You got, oh, there we go. Okay. So the bulk of people over there. Okay, terrific. So you have a handout there that shows you, hold up you get them all out. So this one, there we go. Thank you so much. This one. Okay, so you have this one that says, what's healthcare transition? I want it all to be on the same. A lot of people have this, some people have this. There's more right here. Okay, great. Okay. Terrific. So you don't necessarily need one, but I wanted to make sure everybody knew what the general definition of healthcare transition is, so you get a sense of what we're talking about today and how we in the medical community think about it. And they talk about transition being a deliberate, coordinated provision of developmentally appropriate, right? So we're thinking about not only is it deliberate and coordinated, it's developmentally appropriate, how it works for the young person. And culturally competent, right? So you're thinking about all these things that have to happen. And we're talking about not only health, but we're talking about self-determination, right? Somebody being able to do what they need to do. They call it person-centered planning. In other words, making a plan that makes sense for the young person you're talking about. You're not making the plan for them. The plan is being made with them, and in some instances, almost all by them. As well as work and independence, community life. Now, when you think about that, and I want to start, the other piece is this wonderful grid. We're going to compare the culture of pediatrics to adult health care. How many of you remember the last time you saw your pediatrician? There's some young people in this audience here, right? Are the young people still seeing their pediatrician? Yeah, we've got two folks here that are both seeing their pediatrician. So this is going to be, they can be our guide here as they're thinking about this. All of the rest of you are seeing adult doctors, right? Anybody out there seeing a pediatrician? I had somebody raise their hand that was about 50 and was still seeing a pediatrician. And I think most people, when they talk about the healthcare system, don't necessarily like the healthcare system, right? When you're thinking about it. Everybody like their healthcare system, the way it works? You know, I see a lot of shaking of heads. So when you think about the culture of pediatrics, when somebody is going into pediatrics, they are very much interested in preventive care and helping the young person grow and develop. And a lot of it's preventive care. So most of pediatrics, before we get to pediatric rheumatology, is about coming in at certain times and getting the right things done. Remember, you all brought your kids in when they were 1 month and then 5 months and so forth when they went along this way. And they spend most of the time being pediatricians and pediatric rheumatologists talking to who? They talk to the parents, right? They're almost always talking to the parents. When you leave that system, who does the interns talk to? Talks to you. And the first question on that questionnaire that you had was, what's the age of majority? What is it in the United States? Anybody know? 30? All right. That's good. Anybody, another one? 18. And what happens at 18? What does that mean? We knew the day you're 17 and then the next day you're 18. What does that mean? Yeah, what does that mean? You can get arrested for crime, I got it. Okay, what else? You can vote. You can vote. You can get married anytime. You have time to emancipate once you're married, right? Okay.
You can't talk to your parents unless you do.
That's right. So there's a law. There's a law out there that says that unless the young person gives permission, if they're confident, if there's a question that they can't do it on their own, that the parent needs to not be present. And that's a very important thing. What else about 18? What else can they do at 18? necessarily want to do some of these things. They can join the military, they can fight for the country.
Not our kids.
Well, I'm just saying in general, you're right. I have a lot of kids that are in the military that have arthritis. Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
But we didn't really name them on.
Yeah, they went to West Point, we had, they can do it. Anything else about that 18? Can they drive? Sure, they're driving in a variety of ages, right? Some of the Midwest, you can actually drive the tractors at 11 and 12 in some states, so that varies, right? But most of the time we're letting them drive around 16 or so, right? What else? Anything else about it? They can make that anytime.
A lot of them are going to college.
They go off to college, but they go out at 17, they go out at 19. So you really brought up the crux of it. They cannot drink in most states, right? They have to wait till they're 21. That's a real rub for a lot of young people. They say, gee whiz, I can be shot for the country, but I can't drink. I get that a lot. And certainly comes up around the drugs that are for kids with arthritis. All right, so now we have this very important time. And that means that most of the planning that has to be done to move into the system where they are the central focus, and the parents are usually not available or in the room at the time, all the planning has to happen when? Before that. And now let's go through this list. Think of all the things they have to prepare for. Okay, so let's go for it. What are some of the things that they have to prepare to learn to do that's on this list that you made up? Yeah. Okay, hold on. Order medications, all right? That's prescriptions, right? They have to know how to call, they know where to call, how to do it, and so forth, right? Then what's the next one? That they have to learn how to do. But you do so nicely for them.
And
have done
for themselves and advocate for themselves. They need to know how to come in with a list of questions and symptoms and how they need to organize their presentations.
You need to be organized.
Valuable time with the doctor efficiently.
You need to be organized. They need to understand their health condition, right? They don't understand what they have. Understand their health condition. Okay, their JAO, whatever you got, right? What else do you all have to think about?
They have to accept their health condition.
Did you get that?
Accept their health condition.
Okay, they understand it, accept it, okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
But they have to be able to advocate what it's trying to say, because when they go with the parents are talking for them, and they're in high school, they're told what to do, they leave when the bells ring, they come when the bells ring, suddenly they're responsible for everything that they do.
All right, what else? What else do they have to know about insurance?
Make appointments.
Make appointments, yeah. Good, no, that's good for insurance.
Very medical medicine.
Okay, what about insurance? What?
I said it's a really scary time.
That's very fun. Okay, I'll put scary next year.
Also like jobs and making money,
Okay.
Other college. That's what do I call it?
What about, before they go into a job, what do they often do? They leave high school? Okay, so college and getting ready for that. These are all the things we can talk about that you need to prepare this young person to do. What else? We've got some experts here. What haven't they brought up?
There's a lot of stuff related to the insurance issue, with choosing a career. Many of the things that we had to look at fall within the parameters of the things that you brought up, but just a little bit more detailed. Things like all of you who have children maybe from the you're taking your PSATs, then your SATs. All the guidance counselors are saying, okay, where do you want to go in college? How do you want to plan your college career? What do you want to be? And the kids just shake their heads and they don't know. As parents of children, of any children that have special needs, you have to start thinking, if Christy had told me she wanted to be a paratrooper and she has jumped out of an airplane, you know, that would not have been a realistic career choice for her. So we really did start talking back early high school as to what career path would be something she'd like to do, and that it would definitely be something that she could do. And then gearing her high school courses towards that to make sure that she had the prerequisites. And Dr. White will talk probably some more about the insurance issue, but many of your insurances, if you're well insured through your company or corporation, many of them will either drop your children when they're 18, if they're
26, remember the law?
Right. Okay, so they have all changed now. Okay, so it wasn't just my own. It used to be that her birthday after she graduated from college, which was several months after she graduated, she was no longer covered under my husband's insurance and had to cope with it, which meant she worked for how many months? Many months at a transitional job before she got her main job, but she worked strictly to pay for the COBRA. That's all the money she made went to pay for the COBRA because we couldn't dare drop the insurance. So now it's 26, and
They can stay on your insurance, right, since the, they don't have to 26. But the issue here is the same, it just happens at 26. And what do you do every time when you go off to a doctor's appointment about the insurance, right? Sometimes you have to bring in forms. You have to do a lot of things. So you have to start talking about this, because they're going to be going to a doctor potentially in another area of the country and thinking about how they negotiate all those things that you do for them around the insurance coverage. Okay, so there's a lot of issues here about, you know, handling money and so forth. I like the word scary. It is scary.
Well, one thing about the insurance, if I'm not mistaken, it is 26, unless they have a job where insurance is available for them to purchase or have. If they are employed and the company that they work for has insurance available to them, they do not get it wrong. So that's the key factor. You can't agree on college. Company that works for vacation support system, what it is in your company, doesn't matter. If their insurance is available for their place of work, then you can't carry it.
So there you go. So it'll happen at some point.
26 unless they're not working.
Unless they're not working, exactly.
Even if you haven't, you know, we encourage our children to college now to not be on the 10-year plan for college. Because, you know, 26 is a drop, you know, it is when you're still.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yes.
And our insurance went up so high, you know, we have to go through deductibles, which we didn't have for the Obama. And so everyone, a lot of people say, oh, it's great to get all insurance, but we really can't afford our company now to go to the doctor before we really have it.
So the key thing here is to start planning and thinking about this. This is not easy. Right? This is a very tumultuous time for coverage and cost. So thinking about that and thinking about how you can maximize the situation, and this means you've got to plan early for this.
What percentage of kids graduate from college can't find jobs? Right now.
There are a lot of issues that society places on us here. So let's go back and think a little bit about how are you going to go about getting them ready to go to that first appointment when you are not there. So how many of you are actually not in the room with your young person now when you're sitting here? Is everybody still in the room the whole time? The whole time? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you did.
Well, she's over 18, she's 19, and she wasn't diagnosed until her, you know, spring of her junior year of high school in the spring, so it's been the fast track all the way, and none of us have been prepared for it. And
speaking up, that's a good thing. She's advocating for herself, and perhaps not the way you wanted her to.
Well, she's been mad at me for the last year. I think she's been frustrated with her life, so.
Yeah.
And her mom, she would say to me,
So what do you want to do to get them ready to have you leave the room? Should you just walk out when they're 18? Okay, so when do you think you ought to start letting them be there by themselves? What do you think is the rough time?
You know, I think it's important. Amanda is 17 now, but for the last 2 years, we go in and I make her talk to her intelligence. And he talks to her. He'll look at me, and he started looking at me at first and asking me questions. And said, you know, I'm there, and if there's anything she says that's not right, and there's always things she leaves out because she doesn't want to, you know, she'll say, oh, I'm not feeling great, you know, no, maybe remember this, you know. And then it comes out. But I think it's really important that we make them start talking to them intelligence and bringing those things first, instead of mom always saying it until they turn 18.
And at what time do you think you should actually leave that room?
I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet, but I can sit through almost the entire appointment at this point now, because she's been doing this for 2 years, where she's saying, and I don't have to say much of anything. He'll look at me and he'll say, do you have anything else? And usually I don't have much of anything else, but it's because we've been working on that part of it. And I'm scared to go into the adult early enough. That.
Transitions are scary, no matter what they are. Right, absolutely.
To jump in here real quick. I think we started, I was probably around 14. And what we would do is I would come into the appointment, Dr. White would kick my parents out, and
Screaming.
you'll hear from my mother later. You'll understand. And so I would go in, and it is very difficult for teenagers, especially early teenagers, to be able to express, you know, what went on in the last several months. We tend to gloss over it. If we're feeling better, oh, everything's been great. Oh, well, I forgot about that flare that happened 2 weeks ago. And so I would go in, she would ask me questions. Oh, I'm great. Yeah, things are fine. Things are going all right. And then my parents would be brought in afterwards, and my mom would have her list of questions. And she'd say, well, did Christy tell you about this? Dr. White would say, no. And she'd look at me and I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot that. Next question. Well, did Christy tell you about this? No. Forgot that too. And after a while, I think it was more the fear of, if I don't ask this question, my mom's going to kill me. And so, you know, it was the type of thing that it took a little while to learn how to communicate to the doctor. But one of the things I've learned just from the sessions that we've done over the last couple of years here at the conference, if there's a parent in the room, the child responds differently. The majority of the time. Now, there are some kids that are just outgoing and are going to talk anyway, but a lot of times, if their parent, and I do it to a certain extent sometimes, if my mom's standing right next to me, I'll just defer to her and let her answer the question. And so it's important early on to, you know, let them speak for themselves in an opportunity where you're not necessarily present, but you can come in and talk to the doctor afterwards and say, okay, did they share this? Yes or no? So I think that helped me, especially learn to talk to you and learn to share what I had been going through and remember everything. And then it would get to the point where I would go to the appointments on my own, and sometimes we conference call my mom back at home and say, okay, here are the questions that you sent me in with, and these are the answers, and yes, we discussed it. But little steps, which is why it's important to start early, rather than, hey, we're about to go off to college and I've never talked to my doctor privately.
My husband and I did go out kicking and screaming the first time Dr. White suggested that she talk to Christy first and then us. And I was so worried that Christy would forget to say something important or that the doctor would change her medication and we wouldn't have talked about it. And of course, none of that happened. You know, we were a part of the appointment, but just not at the beginning. It's really important, I learned, because there are some questions between a doctor and a patient that the patient is not going to be forthcoming if mom and dad are standing there. Or there are some counseling things, especially with the meds that our kids are on, that the doctors need to talk to the children about. Alcohol is a very good example. You know, I made the assumption We are a temperance house. I don't have booze in my house at all, and I assume my kids wouldn't drink at all. And Dr. White brought it up to Christy alone. And of course I said, what'd you say? And she wasn't going to tell me, but Dr. White was able to tell her that the medication that she was on right now, things would be very, very dangerous if she did drink. So it wasn't coming from Dad and I. You know, kids will blow off what Dad and Mom say. Don't just assume that that your children aren't going to do something just because you've said not to do it. They need to hear that from their doctors alone. Many other probably reasons why Mom and Dad shouldn't be in there for the whole appointment, other than the issues of independence. As Christy said, kids are intimidated when their whole family is standing there listening to the answers to their questions.
So how can you prepare for the times when they're asked and said, how's everything? And they say, fine. You know full well that it wasn't fine, all right? So, yes, how could you prepare?
During that time, write down the diary, today I have the back, today this and that, and then you do forget, and then you just take back and say, oh, it was fine, it was out the back, and what about the bedroom, so I just write it down, and then if she wants to set up, I'm trying to set up. Most of the time she wants to, but I can have her start talking to her and have the list so she knows that she told the doctor what questions to ask.
So when is she going to write the questions down?
I already do it.
There you go. All right.
I kind of associate it with it's kind of like learning to do laundry. Nobody wants to do their own laundry, and unless my mom made me do my own laundry, I wasn't going to do it. And so that's kind of the thing one of the things you want to learn before you go away to school 3 hours away, unless you bring your laundry home every month for your mom to do. But you want to learn before you go off to school, so once you get there, you're not shrinking all your clothes and turning them all pink. And it's kind of the same thing that I would be happy to let her do it, unless she kind of stepped in and said, no, this is something you need to learn to do on your own. So it's a joint thing. There's sometimes where, yes, the mom does need to step in and say, okay, this is what you need to do.
So what's hard here is that people have to try it out. And there's a risk in transition. You got to try things out. And it's always better to try it out when there's a safety net. And the question is how long you need that safety net. In general, I try to be sure that the youth is handling everything about their health care by the age of 17. So if they're leaving at the end of that year, they've had a chance to fail, to not take their medicines and get into trouble, do whatever it is they're going to do. Because if it happens when they're away from home, the statistics are that if they leave college because they've had a medical problem, they're less likely to return. So you really need to let them fly. But this is hard. It's scary. But it's much better to do it when you're watching than if it's happening when you're not watching. So we're starting to back up now. So by 17, if everything's done, when do you think you should start these processes?
I think it varies according to the child.
Yeah.
Some children are more mature and can handle certain things earlier than others maybe. I have one child that has arthritis, one that has Crohn's, and since they were diagnosed, my daughter with arthritis was just last year when she was 15, and my son was diagnosed at 13 with Crohn's, and from day one, they've been in charge of their medication. They've actually called and made their appointments. They told me, Mom, my appointment's on September 23rd. Can you take me? I looked at the calendar, it's fine. I said, yeah. If not, then I changed the appointment. And since the beginning, they've been in charge of that. They actually call the pharmacy, put the right number right on in, I go pick it up. So they're pretty much taking care of it. they know how to do all that. And it was maybe because they were older that they just started from day one doing that. I don't know, but it's worked well. They've never run out of medication. They've never missed an appointment or anything like that. So it's worked well for us. And like I said, my son's 13, so, you know, for certain kids, I don't think 13 is too young because he's never done really well in maintaining.
Wow, you better give your gold dust to the rest of the family that's here.
And that's when you started writing that stuff, I was shocked because I thought that most kids did that, but I don't know, maybe it was just, and my children, I think it was, like she said about her rheumatologist, I think it's also, if your children have good communication with their doctor and they feel comfortable with them, then it's going to be a lot easier for them to do the transition or to do the tasks that are necessary for them. My children both love their doctors, they really can't wait to go back to see them. And truthfully, my older daughter, who's 16 now, doesn't shut up the whole time she's in there. And I mean, after 45 minutes, he's already like, okay, the appointment's over, you know, because she loves it so much. So I think that's a bonus when you see, you know, a child who really enjoys and trusts their rheumatologist.
I don't think that's normal. Mike said it one arthritis. You know, if you want to runner, so you can run, you want to go to the doctor, they put it want to come here. What is happening? People are crying all around, they have a little hospital. He didn't want to go. He was never probably he just not taking medication. So there's a very extreme reaction. It's like, I don't want to go to the doctor. I don't want to take any medication. But I have said it's not my arthritis, it's yours. But, you know, so there's this extreme range because he wouldn't have cared. He would have just stayed, you know, depressed and dead and not on. So I don't like going to the doctor. I like it so much. You know, so there's a whole range. Yeah.
Right, it's a huge range, and therefore knowing your youth and knowing how hard the transition is going to be for you and them. It may be longer or it may be shorter. And that's what it's about there. It's saying, how is my young person stacking up with the things that they're going to have to do here, and you can't do them quickly. Think about transitions you've made in your life. You just don't, you know, when they're fast, you often have a lot of trouble. You know, it's very hard to do the job when bills coming. But you do plan for weddings. You do plan for things. And so it's a question of planning and having a transition plan. Yes?
So how do you do it when we have a kid like that? Yeah, I mean, I have a similar, or like mine, where there's no time.
Yeah, well, it's harder when they're but if you have time, they've had their disease long enough. So what's the best way to get somebody to do something they don't want to do? What? So there's one, bribery is an answer. What's another one? You know, you got the crowd here telling you. What? What was it?
Well, ice cream.
Ice cream. Was it ice cream you said? Ice cream.
Something wasn't afterwards, yeah.
So
Maybe, but depending on how old they are, they're pretty offensive. Depending on how old they are, my police mad. So here is the driving or she might come in. Yeah, okay.
no, this isn't for everybody.
No.
I'm trying to give everybody in the audience an opportunity to think of different things about how to handle this. No, we're not telling you there's one right answer. So bribery is one, but we're going to give you some other ideas.
One thing that I always told, I have 3 children. Christy's sandwiched in by brothers. And one thing I told all of my kids is that if you want to have independence, if you want to have all of these age-related things that you want to do, then you need to deal with your responsibilities. Privileges come with responsibilities, just like adults. And so somebody that perhaps doesn't want to step up to the plate yet will want to, because normally teenagers want to be teenagers and there are things that they want to do. You know, the thing is just like adults, when we approach our children, we need to remember what stage they're in. Even is their disease in a big flare? Are they in a lot of pain? You know, what's going on in their lives right now, because it might not be a really good time to step forward and say, oh, and by the way, I'm not going to give you your medicine anymore in the morning. That's going to be your responsibility. You know, you have to know your own child and know what buttons to push to get that result.
This is one that I don't know that I would totally recommend, and parents will not like it. You didn't do it willingly. But one of the things is let your child fail sometimes. There were times where I was, and even in college, oh man, when I told my mom I was going on a road trip for spring break down to South Carolina, she just, you're doing what? And you know this is how you're going to feel, and you're going to come back and crash, and sure enough, that's what I did. But I was at the age where I made the decision, and I said, you know what? She's right. I'm going to come back and crash, but this is something I want to do. When she said, telling your child, I'm not going to give you your medication anymore. You need to get up in the morning and take it yourself. I was so mad. And again, I've had it since I was 2 years old, and so I was used to my mom or dad in the morning coming in, and my dad would go to work at 5 o'clock, so he'd come in around 4:30, and he'd give me a cup, and I barely open my eyes, and I'd swallow it, and I'm done. So when I was early in high school, they told me, oh, by the way, you're going to have to get up in the morning and take your medication. Well, it's not that big a deal for Dad to just come in and hand it to me. I don't understand. But I remember, I don't know how old I was, going into Dr. White's office and saying, oh yeah, by the way, I'm pretty much off of all my medication. And she kind of just looked at me and went, how's that working out for you? And so it gave me an opportunity to see that, hey, I made this decision not to take my medicine for, I don't know, a month or whatever. It probably wasn't that long, you're right. And this is how I felt afterwards, And so then it gave me, the opportunity to see, okay, this is why I'm taking the medication. There's a reason for it. And so whether I wanted to take it or not, I realized that, hey, if I want to be able to do this activity after school, if I want to be able to go to school, I need to make sure that I take my medication. So it became more of a decision-making thing on my end rather than somebody just handing me a cup and saying, here, take this. But it's very hard for her to hands off and watch your child kind of fail and struggle a little bit, but they're learning through that about what they can do.
I work with elementary and middle schoolers, and when we're doing math problems, there are certain word problems that we do guess, test, and revise. And I think any kid that has a disease, it's sometimes guess, test, and revise. So if something that doesn't work, you revise it. I remember Dr. White telling us when Christy was a Girl Scout and we were going to keep her from going on a camping trip, she was going to have to hike with crutches. And I said, no, she's not going. And we were here at a conference, and Dr. White suggested that Christy needs to know what her limitations are, and you need to let her fail sometimes, or she's never going to be able to figure it out. We thought that she would never drive. I thought she would never be able to go away to college or hold a job. And she's out of my house. She drives all over the country. She's jumped out of an airplane. She doesn't need me at all. So, but she might not ever have learned that if Dr. White hadn't pushed us to allow her to transition, because we were used to caring for her. She was diagnosed before she was 2. And it becomes a habit, It becomes a habit.
I remember her saying, we've taken care of you for the last 20-some years, don't screw it up now.
Okay, the statistics are that in the long run, every young person stops their medicines and has a tough time at some point. They're going to test it. They're going to test it over and over again. You remember testing, don't you? What are some of the crazy things you did as an adolescent and you sort of knew that your parents wouldn't have liked to know that? I went to Woodstock. To this day, my parents don't know. So I think that it's scary. I like the word. It's scary to do this, but it's extremely important for you to do relatively early. The worst situation is when they arrive at college with no preparation, or arrive to me as an internist with no preparation. That's where the big failures are. So they're going to do it. The other thing that's very interesting is that the if-then thinking that you all do, if I do this, then, right? If I work, I get money, you know? If I do this, I get a vacation. And it's so logical for you. That is not the thinking that necessarily goes on in a young person's head, right? Though you use that a lot if you take your medicines, you know. If you don't take your medicines, you're going to feel bad, right? Actually, there's a lot of studies about this. It really doesn't get into people's beings until they're in their late 20s, this if-then thinking. Some kids do it earlier, but on the average, really understanding the consequence takes a lot of trial and error. And I know these are important things. You don't want them to stop their medicines. You don't want them to go through a flare. But if you don't let them, they'll never understand what it means. It's the hardest thing ever. I think it's one of the hardest. It's really hard. I'm not telling you something that's easy. And you gotta let them do it before they go away. You gotta let them do it before they go to an adult provider. All these things are going to happen, need to happen before then, right? Because when you go to that adult doctor, all I can do as an adult doctor is say, I think you ought to do this. I have no way to make them do it. They're an adult. Now, the truth is, as a pediatric provider, if I think the family is not taking good care of the youth, I can go to protective services. I have a lever that I can pull to make sure that young person does something, gets the kind of services they need. But as an adult, wouldn't you be pretty mad if I called the police and said, they aren't taking a hypertension medicine, will you please go there and make me do it? So you have to get them ready for this total independence, right? I only recommend when I'm on the adult side. I recommend on the pediatric side, but I have a lot of options. And that's why, from the pediatric side, we often call more, why did you show up? Because we have an obligation to the young person who isn't controlling their situation. And I can do it through the parents. But if your doctor started calling you at home about taking your medicines as an adult, you would get pretty mad about it. Sometimes you get that would be really nice, but boy, you're having a good time, and, you know, Bali somewhere, and you get this text, and when you take your medicines, I'm sure you would really think your doctor could come off the deep end. So think about that. Think about that. Once they go into that adult arena, they really are on their own in terms of the expectation is that they're going to make the decisions. Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is really focused, but do you have any suggestions for kids who like hot during the adult world and passion with this transitioning? And I'm hearing this now, but do you have any suggestions?
So you can work back with them and go through these stages with them even when they're in the adult arena. And I have to do that as an adult provider sometimes because I'm aware of it, but I talk with the family and say, you need to go back now. You need to go back and think about, because they didn't actually, remember, most people who don't have a chronic illness disappear from the healthcare system around 11, 12, 15 sometimes, and they pop back up when need be. Men pop back up around age 50 or 60 because they really don't want to go. You're all laughing, but it's true. This is the statistics. And women show up for what? Birth control and babies, right? Well, mammograms, that's even later. We're talking about having children. So you usually have a 10-year period where nobody is really paying attention to health. What's hard here is that your young people have to stay connected to the system. And that's what's hard. So and this is true, particularly if it's happening on the cusp like you, right? They're sort of 18 and then they get sick and they have to sort of think of all these things really quickly. Now,
they're depressed too. I mean, kids who work like her son who are being athletes and stuff, they get scholarships to college and suddenly they can't walk to the bathroom now. They're going squeaking on their bottom. And they're really depressed.
yeah, so now depression in adolescence is a really serious issue. You need to get the professional help that they need along with this, right? And it's hard. I know how hard all this is. I've had children that way. You can shake your head, but it's very hard.
Put a bag over her head, knock her in the car, and drive her someplace.
Well, Marjorie, she or he is gonna crash, but
It is serious, and, you know, you do need to be talking. One of the things that we found really, really helpful when Christy was going up is coming to the conference every year, because parents had dealt with the same issues. I always went to the workshops that were a couple years ahead, so that I thought I was keeping up ahead of her a little bit, but so that I could see how other parents had dealt with issues that were going to be coming up in the future for me. It was so instructive for me to be able to hear how different people were able to overcome obstacles, like getting the kid to the doctor. Something even silly and ridiculous. How does my daughter shave her legs when she can't reach them? A paint stick, some guy comes up. I strap my daughter's razor to a paint stick. You know, easy little things like that that you just don't even think about. So, is your child here? Coming here and talking to other kids, they talk. You know, all the little social things and stuff. I remember in San Francisco, I don't remember how old you were, but they were having a kids dance, and I just happened to be down in the atrium of the hotel, and she comes up to me, and I said, "Oh, are you having a good time?" And she says, "Mom, they all look like me." It was a revelation to her. She wasn't alone anymore. There were people that dealt with the same issues that she did. And for her younger brother, who came along too, he was able to connect with other people that had arthritis, so it wasn't just his sister, and other siblings. I can't say enough for getting together with other people and networking. Because your child then finds out, I'm not the lone wolf, I'm not the only person that's dealing with this, there are other people that are just like me. And I think that does a lot. I mean, I'm not talking clinical depression right now, but just your general adolescent depression and just your general, I've got arthritis or another disease. If you find somebody else, you become stronger because, you know, there's somebody else that's like me. Nobody wants to be alone.
Another thing I really want to say to all the parents out there, when you look at the big studies about kids with chronic illnesses, one of the best things that predicts a good outcome is the fact that they have engaged parents. So everybody in this room has got a leg up, right? And I think you have to at some point congratulate yourselves, because this is hard, this is very hard, but that's a really good thing to know. The fact that you're engaged is going to make a big difference in how they do. Another great study, just to give you some thoughts about this, is that if I put 10 people in their 30s or 40s up here, and this is a study that was actually done, all of them had challenges of one sort or another, was mental illness or whatever, and were asked what was the most important thing that they felt helped them to be successful, and they were all successful in the way they define it. It's another thing that's very important is thinking about what is success here, right? They had a vision and they have to shift that vision of their success. So thinking about that together. What do you think these young people said? Anybody got a good idea? You know, we can throw out some ideas as well. Not having overprotective parents. Not having overprotective, what? Family support. What are some of the other things? These are all true. There was one that stood out though. Having both challenged and non-challenged friends, right? Coming to a meeting and meeting other people that had arthritis, and this is a really important thing. Getting involved like young people do, and you too with the Arthritis Foundation. Everybody, seeing their doctor at a walk. I mean, that's a really important thing, that they see everybody's involved and the family gets to be involved. Any other ideas?
Having independence.
I'm sorry?
Having independence.
Having independence. Having independence, remember, it's very hard for people on that stage. They want independence. Please, Mom, take me to the mall, but on the way, give me lots of money. The other line of things from this, right? You're right. But that was not one of the ones. It was interesting. It was family support. It was having friends.
Having it be okay to fail and get back up.
Yeah, okay. In a way, that's true. That was it. Now, the one was actually doing family chores. She laughs. My children never liked this story. So this is actually a study. It's a 35-year study done on the island of Kauai. I know we'd all like to be on the island of Kauai. But this is a sociological study, and they're still doing it. They interviewed all the mothers that were pregnant, and it followed all the youth that are on the island or off the island, and some, became drug addicts, some people are whatever. And why did they say that? It's because they were treated like everybody else. The next sentence is, and somebody really expected me to be like everybody else. So if the household chore, many people, how many of you did household chores, right? A lot of people do, right? Now, some cultures they don't, but it's the one question I ask as a physician. Is everybody doing the same thing in the household? There's a wonderful story of a young man who was quadriplegic who had to make his bed. It took him an hour every day, but as far as he was concerned, it was one of the most important things that he learned. He learned that one, he could, two, he was expected to, and he could do it just as well as anybody else. He may do it differently. Or they always talk about there was a minister, there was a coach, the coach let me carry the water even though I couldn't play. There are a lot of people who talk about this person, and most of the time, it's you guys, right? My parents did. You don't have to.
No, I mean, my mom shared a little bit of, with the diagnosis come these ideas of, oh, my child will never do this, my child will never do that. I tend to like to break that idea. And so she tells me, well, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to do this. And I'm like, yeah, watch me. And she still does to this day. I mean, we go on vacation, and she's like, oh, I'll get that and put it in the car. And now I'm kind of more concerned about her, and like she's going to fall or hurt herself or something. So now I got it, I'm going to do it. The whole skydiving thing, well, you'll never be able to, you can't skydive. I think she was just scared. But, it's the type of thing where, like Dr. White said, I'm the type of person that I want to prove you wrong. But yeah, doing the normal activities, whether I have to do it some kind of adaptive way or not, I want to do it. And so that's important too, is, like you said, being expected to do something, and giving them, okay, well, you can do it your own way, you can take however much time you need to, but it needs to get done. I think it's a big thing.
Christy got to the point that by the time she was 12, we had taken her, I have a daycare business, older kids, and the guards at the pool taught her adaptive swimming, so that when she would swim freestyle to get a breath, she would have to roll onto her back. So she went down the pool like a missile. I don't know how she didn't get dizzy, but she swam very well. And when she was 12, I hired her to help me watch the 6- and 7-year-olds in the pool, and I had every confidence that if there was ever a problem, that she would be able to deal with that. After that, we actually had people that were looking for her to be babysitter. So here we have a child that's pretty well afflicted with arthritis, but, she was able to do that kind of stuff. You remember that?
So let's think about some other things. What are some of the kinds of things you need to gather? Right? What about emergencies? Who has information in their children's phones, that if they're found unconscious, that their information is available and the number is there? Anybody, you got it? So why don't you stand up and tell everybody where it is? Yeah, but it's nice. What does it stand for, and where do you come all the way up here?
I don't know what it stands for, but it's just the emergency contact. Oh yeah, in case of emergency. So I programmed his phone when he got it, and I put my number in it, my husband's number, grandma's number. And it's just, if an emergency personnel come upon your child in a car accident, whatever, they'll go and look for that information in their phone and call it. And I also, when he was on medications, I put a little piece of paper tucked in his wallet and had the list of his diagnosis and the medications he was on, so they would know that. I never went so far as to get him an ID if anything ever happened and he was unconscious, they could find pertinent information for him.
Great, so the key thing here is be sure the number at the other end is not their boyfriend, not their girlfriend, but somebody that is actually very familiar. Now, you all should have it as well. I have it in my phone, it's my sister. So if something happens to me, because they don't look for your pocketbook if it's a girl. The most important thing was the one thing that almost everybody has in this country, and Verizon and these people are so excited that we spend so much money on it, it's a cell phone. You can also put underneath that quickly if they have any major allergies, that's very important. If they're on steroids, some people will wear bracelets. There you go. Some won't, right? Some just won't do it, won't wear a bracelet and stuff. But it's really important that you have that. And all these contact information, because we have some sheets that we'll hand out that sort of prompt you to think about having an emergency contact sheet that is with your young person, particularly as they leave you, of what to do. And going through the drill. What? You have to go through the drill. What happens if? And keep asking and keep drilling, right? Right? You've been drilling lots of things into these kids over the many years, right? They've got your values now, but now you got to give them some practical stuff. What else do they need to have? They need to be able to tell you about their disease. They need an elevator speech. I'm 16, I have juvenile arthritis, these are my medications, and they should know them, they should know their, and if they don't, there should be a piece of paper somewhere they can pull it out, no matter where they are. Now, in this age, we just give them I just write it down, it's a one-page medical record, it's on their computer. I can tell you how many times they love it. They should put print when they hit the ER, for any reason they hand it, and they feel so important because they don't have to tell the story again. Right? How many times have they had to tell the story? So, how many of you have a one-page medical record? Well, there you go. What made you do it? Come on back up here. And we've got some templates for you. We'll hand this out at the end so you have all this stuff.
I guess I kind of was forced to do it because my son's medical binder was so thick that it was easier when we went to the doctor to just give a summary, and then they could look for the information that that particular doctor needed in his binder. So it was also helpful to the school nurses, and I would also give information like that to all of their teachers, my kids. I have more than one kid with it, but at the start of every school year, I give a summary to the teachers so that they know what history they have and what to look for, because no one's going to read the binder. So it was much easier.
And where are they?
Good question.
All right,
Yeah, I don't know.
that's what has to happen. Right, you're modeling the behavior you want them to have, right, and then handing it over, right? So, how many of you got a letter after you see your doctor? Copy of that letter. Some of you do. Do you get that? So you want to model that and be sure your youth starts getting the letter too. Building that medical record is extremely important. We don't have a universal electronic record. They aren't putting a chip into us yet. Right? And the systems are so different and they're so hard. Now, I do it awfully. At one point I was giving it on flash drives to young people so that we could change it each time they came in. The problem is now there's sometimes viruses on this and I can't upload it. So you'll figure out a way to do this. But so the general approach is at 14 they should be involved in developing this one-page medical record, right? They begin to learn how to describe what they have and the medicines that they're on and be able to do it quickly. You don't want to spend the very little bit of time you have with your doctor having them have to pry out the questions. What you want to do is spend the time in collaboration and partnership and making decisions. And you want to model that. So bringing in your questions, but it has to be the young person's questions pretty soon. You know, you can do it forever, but at some point, they're going to have to do it on their own. And the sooner you begin to make these shifts, most people feel that you should start it as soon as they can. It's a developmental process. But remember, the clock is ticking, and at 18, it has to be done. If you've got a quick learner, try it at 17 and a half. I've never seen it work. And I think also celebrate the important things. So I give a story that I'm often called in to do transition consultations, right? And I came in and this young person with diabetes and arthritis. Once again, it stops taking their medicines and insulin, was in the hospital, pretty sick. And they called me in, and I walked in, and there was parents wringing their hands there, but their subspecialists were there. And I turned to the young person and said, "Congratulations." Now they all looked at me and said, "Who is this crazy lady?" But Christy talked about this. I said, "Congratulations, you made a decision." They want to hear they can make decisions. You guys, you want to feel like you're a little bit of an adult. Then I just said, "I'm not sure I would have made that one. Let's talk about it." So think about talking about it a little differently and letting people feel like other comments, other questions people have? Yes?
I have a question. You mentioned about letting them fail, especially with their medications and stuff, before they get medication. But do you need to discuss that with the doctor first? Because what I'm afraid of is, okay, you give them, okay, it's your responsibility to take the young now. And then you go to the doctor, and the doctor looks at you, at me, and says, "Why aren't you taking medication?"
It's a really good question. What you're doing is developing a transition plan with your physician.
Okay.
And so I sit down and say, they're going to be 18, they're 14. These are all the things, right? I actually do this, sit down, they make a list, and I say, what are we going to do this year? And this year is to try to take your own medicines. I look across the table to the parent and say, we know what we're in. So, communication is the key, right? And thinking about making a plan. That's what this is about, making a plan to make that change. And have it as a discussion like a medication plan. Like the treatment plan you've got, you've now got a transition plan. And sharing it with your doctor, I think, is great. You know, it's also hard for doctors to let you go. It's extremely hard.
That's what I'm afraid the doctor's just going to say, well, no, you have to make sure they take it. And I don't know if the doctor can be going to,
You got to talk it over. You're right. It may be hard for the doctor. It can be very hard for the doctor. So they did a big survey of pediatricians. And besides finding it hard, the community resources for young adults, and finding sometimes adult internists, it was generalists, the next hardest thing for them was letting their patients go that had chronic illness. Admitting that that was hard, and not wanting to even, like all of us, admit that they're going to do that. Right? So you're dealing with another person just like you, who has a tremendous investment in your young person. So how can you do it? Yeah.
Just because you give your child the opportunity to take some responsibility doesn't mean you can't be monitoring. Like I would kind of give them the power, but yet still make sure and have my ways of, did you take this? Or, just ask little questions, but not be hovering and stop pouring it out or whatever. I love the things over there, I still know what was going on. Maybe even they didn't know anything what was going on. They thought I wasn't, but you just still, these are some powerful drugs that you need to have, especially if you have a child that's struggling with, how they're feeling in depression. They got some pretty powerful medication that they're able to disposal.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. You want to do it when they're home. You don't want to send them off without this preparation and have the trouble when you're not there. So you really want to have a big period of time where they go through the stresses of being a senior in high school, trying to manage their illness, going to a senior prom, doing all the things that they're going to do in spades in college or when they're not at home, and saying the consequences are if they decide, today I'm just not going to take it, right? I'm just not going to do it today. We all do this. We don't do our exercise one day. We eat the chocolate cake we shouldn't eat. We all do this a little bit, and that's part of what you do. You balance, right? She's balancing.
Okay. Just to jump in real quick, again, transition planning is not just for young people with a chronic disease. Everyone has to, at some point, leave their parents' house. I'll go to my parents' house So I've been with the Coast Guard for about a year, but before that I spent 7 years with a contracting company. In the last 3 or 4 years with them, I was a project manager, and I had a team of 8 people I was responsible for. And so I was responsible for all the hiring and all the HR type issues. One of my fellow project managers, I sat in on an interview with them, helping them try and hire someone for their team. And it was a young girl. She was right out of college, and we thought, she'd be a pretty good fit. So he extended her the offer. The next day, her mother called because she didn't feel that that her daughter had negotiated the salary well enough. Needless to say, my coworker, my fellow project manager, kind of rescinded the offer and said, "I'm sorry, it's not. We can't go higher or anything like that." But just the fact that your mother can't negotiate your salary for your first job. So it's the same type of thing. To be successful, they need to be able to speak up for themselves. Otherwise, your offer's going to take them.
And you can put the best transition plan in the world together. You can start at age 14. You can start letting them go little by little, instead of just dumping them at 18. And something can go awry. That doesn't mean that you failed or your child has failed. That's just human nature. It's the way things are. And so you pick up the pieces and you move on. We had an honor roll student that we let go off to college. The parameters for our family was that she had to choose a school that was within a day's drive, just in case she crashed and burned, so we could get to her. And at the December, when she came home from her first semester, we found out that she was on the academic watch list. This is my honor roll student. I made some phone calls. She never said a word to me. Made some phone calls and found out she hadn't been to class for several weeks. She had an arthritis flare, and we had everything all set up with the Disabled Student Services office that if she had a flare, all she had to do was make one phone call. She didn't make the phone call. For whatever reasons, she was trying things out, and maybe she can tell you why, because she hasn't told me why. But we had everything in place. The transition thing was there. The nurse, everybody was all on board, and she didn't make the one phone call. So we were actually thinking of not sending her back to school. She was a mess. We had to take her in to see the doctor, and the doctor took us aside and said, if there's any way that you can keep her in school, I'd like you to do it, because she's learning things there that are not occurring within the four walls of the classroom. She's learning life experience. And I mean, that's for all of us. For children who don't have physical challenges also, they're going to be making decisions. You're going to have set up all kinds of stuff for them. They're going to try things out. Things are not going to work. They're going to crash and burn, and then they're going to learn something. And what they're going to learn is, this didn't work. And so next time, I'm going to think of a better response. So, when that happens, I'm not even going to say if, because it won't probably be the same scenario, but it'll be something else. But that's all part of it. It's all part of, getting your kids to fly. You don't let them go all at once and just say, well, you're 18, goodbye, have a good life. That safety net we're building from the age of about 14 up, maybe even younger. And we're there to catch them until they move out of the home. But we're also there after they turn 18 if they've crashed and burned, and say, okay, well, how are you going to fix this? How are things going to be different? And just being here at this conference, you're building safety nets. You're starting the transitioning process. So I commend everybody that's here. I just think that this is one of the best things that you can do for your child.
Great, so we're actually if anybody can come up and ask anybody questions, I don't have a bunch of handouts here, like I tell you what's here, so you decide. So I have a transition readiness assessment that your youth could take and see how that works. Please take one, gee whiz, I'm sure that's what you're looking at, no idea so many people come. I have a whole developmental activity, I'm on the chair here, a developmental activities checklist all the way up from birth, all the way up to you ought to be thinking about We have preparing for college, things about you should